This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls, and this week, Dan Lynch and I talked to Pete Kaminski, who was on last August talking about Massive Wiki, which is this cool thing that he does. He's one of the old heads on the subject of wikis, but he covers so much more. This may have been, or may be, going into it, the deepest show we've ever done. Pete is a really interesting dude. You really have to hear this show, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 719, recorded Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. Let the Wiki win. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Collide. That's Collide with a K. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/floss and book a demo today. Hello again, everyone, everywhere. I am Doc Searls. This is FLOSS Weekly, and I am joined this week from Liverpool, I assume, Dan Lynch himself. And there he is.
I am on the outskirts of Liverpool. But yeah, I'm here coming in across the water.
a lot of
the
water.
Waves. Yeah. Radio and otherwise.
Yeah. So how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm in my new lair here.
You look a bit like, for people listening on the audio, I should say, you look a bit like you're underground. There's a lot of stone.
We are. I am underground. This is.
Right. Cool.
This is a basement of a house built in 1899, which is modern in England,
UK. Yeah.
I know, and but old here, and that's limestone walls that you see there. And this town, Bloomington, Indiana, was in the limestone business for a very long time. There's a famous movie in 1979 that came out called Breaking Away, which I highly recommend. It's a great movie, a teenage coming of age movie, and the house the kid lived in was one like this. So when you see that house in that movie, you'll see a house like this one. They built many workers' cottages, they called them, but the quarry operators and the big furniture company that was here at the time went out of their way to make sure that there were nice houses for their workers. But people wanting to restore these houses to their original condition would have to put the privy out back and have no closets, because closets then were all separate things that you rolled around or dragged from, a wardrobe, for example, like the Lion, the Witch, and were, in places like this. So it has a lot of old house charm, which is to say, it's been fixed so many times and has so many layers of stuff, and there are walls you can't nail things into because they're hard plaster on lath. Oh yeah,
right.
Or they're plaster on lath, meaning that if you drive a nail into that, you'll chip out a hunk of wall 2 inches wide. Get a drill. Anyway, so
character anyway.
Yeah. So you were saying earlier you actually listened to the last show we did with Pete Kaminski.
I did. I watched it today. So I'm going to be quoting all things to you both that you said, 5-6 months ago, as if you just said them.
Well, things are happening fast, so I want to revisit some of those things. So let's welcome to the show. This is Pete Kaminski, who I know from way back when you were at Social Text, right? You were
at least that early, yeah.
At least that far, and And Pete is always like the wisest person in the room, and usually the smartest as well. And I there's a list we're both on where every so often people weigh in and everybody will kind of go quiet because he says or say amen and then like ask him some more questions. Kind of like if you know Dune, he's kind of a mentat. There are lots of smart people on that list as well. So we talked about Massive Wiki last time, mostly, I guess, which is your creation. So why don't you fill us in on what that is, and then maybe what the delta is between last time and this time?
Sure thing. Massive Wiki is an easy way to organize and collaborate on text-based information. So things that you write, you can write with many people. and it's also a wiki. So the things that Wiki gives you, easy editing, easy linking between pages in the information space, that all works. One of the things that's new is this website. It's improved since last time we saw it. It's a little bit more organized and a little bit more up to date. Massive Wiki is almost 2 years old, and the version that we saw last show was some of that stuff was pretty much ancient. So this is a lot better, a lot more descriptive, and a lot less confusing.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's at massive.wiki, just so we know. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. Massive.wiki. Yeah, that's the website. I had a look today. It looks great. One thing I wanted to ask about, Peter, since watching the previous show, is do you think? I mean, we're probably going to get into this as we go along. Just for the benefit of people who don't know, we had a little email exchange before talking about AI and the famous Chat GPT and all these other similar things. But a lot of the last show was about collaboration and encouraging people to collaborate, which is kind of what it is what you're doing with Massive Wiki, and seems to be a big part of your philosophy. Do you think in some way we're going to be collaborating with computers in that way? Could we see it less as a kind of evil overlord and more of another collaborator that we might engage with?
The people I know who are using ChatGPT effectively right now are essentially collaborating with it. I would say that it's going to be the thing I really love about humans working together and wikis in particular is that it feels good, and people come up with new ideas that you wouldn't have thought of, and they work differently than you do. So you come to kind of an agreement of how to work together. It reminds me a little bit. We have too few opportunities, I think, in our society for actually working together with people and making decisions about how we do things. I think an almost universal experience for people is collaborating with your family, either when you're a kid, working with your siblings and your parents, or vice versa when you're a parent, having your kids and working with them. Some of the most fun things in my life were the ways that our kids would come up with words or use words in a slightly clever way and different way, or a different word. And the whole family would pick up a different way of working together. Wikis kind of remind me of that. Something like an AI doesn't have that. It's funny. I was going to say it doesn't have that spark of creativity. I find that it's kind of a misunderstanding about AIs, that they're not creative. ChatGPT or the image generators, Stable Diffusion or DALL-E or Midjourney, they're very creative. Not in the way that a person is creative, though. I guess they're mixing and matching a bunch of stuff that they've seen and remember, but not yet in the surprising and heartful ways, soulful ways that people do. So.
Yeah, they kind of remix, that's at least the way I understand it. They have a huge database of knowledge of stuff that they've been trained on, as they call it in that world, and then they remix that kind of stuff. But I was thinking earlier today about the fact that I suppose to some degree it's only the same as what I do as a human. I mean, if I relate lots of things to music. So if I play the guitar, for example, I'm remixing the G chord, the D chord, the whatever chords that I've learned from my database of knowledge, and kind of putting them in a and sometimes in the same sequence as other things I've heard, because I know that works well. So there's even that. It goes down to that level. So I suppose we're all remixing to some degree.
Definitely. And the AIs are really good at that. And I've seen them do surprising things. They will constantly surprise me with the way that they put something novel together. Asking it a joke or telling it to make an image or something like that, it will come up with things that I think are novel, that haven't been seen before. Maybe a difference is that there's a feedback loop that people have. It's like you're playing some chords on your guitar or your keyboard or something like that, and you hear things that are a little bit different and novel, and you go, "Wow, I like that. That was fun. Let me do that again. Let me make some variations on that." the creativity that the AIs have now, they'll accidentally stumble across something, but then they don't know what they found. They don't know if it's good or bad or whatever. So the combination, we are seeing people in combination with AIs. The AI will come up with something, and then the person will say, "Hey, go more in that direction," or take that and mash it up with this other thing. So you still have to have the person in the loop to judge whether or not it's interesting and cool, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. So they don't quite have taste, or I don't know. Maybe they do have taste.
Right.
That's probably unfair, but they don't have taste in the way that we understand it. Should we say? Maybe that's the next stage, an AI that kind of has very distinct views on certain types of music. I don't know. That could happen. So on a kind of technical level, I was talking to someone earlier about the whole challenge of the wiki kind of paradigm, if you like, the wiki kind of world, and the way we use them. And you talked a lot on the last show about how moderating what people do. I mean, you mentioned, I know you guys talked about Wikipedia. It's kind of the elephant in the room, but I know you're not specifically here to talk about that, don't worry. But one of the big things that I know Doc was saying on that show was that it doesn't feel as collaborative, or it doesn't feel like a community or so on. One thing I was thinking about was the security kind of implications, of something like a generative AI that could generate I don't know, say false or misleading information and kind of, at great volume, and hammer it at a kind of a wiki or any kind of site like that. Do you think that's something that people will have to contend with in the future, possibly? Some like people who are maintaining things like wikis?
There's kind of two answers to that. Mm-hmm. One of them is that the first one is that wikis nowadays are not openly collaborative, publicly collaborative. In the early days of Wiki, it was very common to go to a Wiki website and anybody could edit and put in whatever they wanted to. And one of the surprising things that we found was that there was a saying, my Social Text co-founder had a saying, and it was a common kind of thing, that it was easier to delete spam, for instance, than it was to add spam. That was true when people were spamming wikis by hand. It didn't take too long for people to automate spamming wikis, and that whole thing, it went away. So it won't be the case that you'll have an AI or even a person using an AI is probably the more common case. Yeah. It won't be the case that they'll have direct access to a wiki. It'll be access controlled, so that that stuff just won't happen. So then another part of the answer to your question is that definitely, especially with ChatGPT, you can see it's so conversational and so easy. It writes so easily, whether or not it knows it's correct or not. It's just writing, and it's fun to read what it's writing. We're definitely going to see people driving it to create all kinds of misinformation and disinformation and things that aren't real that seem real. Same thing with images. It's a little bit. We've seen automated disinformation for years and years already. It's not a new thing. It's gotten. It may be a way to think about the new AIs is they're kind of democratizing that process. It used to be that you had to be a big fancy research firm to shove a lot of disinformation through, or a big government or something like that to shove a lot of disinformation through Facebook. Now anybody would be able to generate the same amount of BS. But we're gonna have to figure out how that works. It's a tricky problem, but it's I guess it's a gift of the age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just noticed in our chat room here, I've got a quote. Chickenhead21, who's listening and watching, hello, says, "Let the wiki win." That's a Han Solo quote, apparently, which I thought we might appreciate. It just popped up on my screen and it kind of made me chuckle. Let the wiki win. Excellent. So, I was looking at I was looking at a Massive Wiki earlier today and having a kind of play around with it, and it's a great idea to have the stuff kind of distributed. And funny enough, I was doing this as I was watching your interview from last time on another screen, and I kept thinking of questions, and then you kept answering them as I was, watching, which was interesting. But one of the things I found was interesting. It's kind of something that people may not understand is it's kind of when it's distributed in that everybody has their own copy of the whole wiki because you're using Git for that.
Yeah.
What kind of advantages does that bring?
I think that's a really good question. One of the things is kind of a sense of ownership. You know that I don't have to rely on a server somewhere up in the cloud. As soon as I've synced, then I've got the whole thing, and I can do whatever I want with it. If I never got connected back to the internet, I'd still have it. So, and that feels different than, we share this thing in the cloud. Having your own personal copy of it makes it feel different. FedWiki, by the way, is another project by Ward Cunningham. He's doing some cutting edge research on how to the next version of Wiki, and he's got a thing called FedWiki. So every time you edit a wiki, it kind of does something similar. It doesn't kind of does copy the whole wiki, I guess. But so ownership is one, definitely. I think another thing, I don't know if I should worry about this or not worry about this, but it makes me feel good that it's an outcome of it. I think massive wikis are going to be really resilient against catastrophe. In the zombie apocalypse, if everybody's made a copy of the massive wiki, they don't have to rely on the central servers being up or much electricity. If they've still got a copy on their Raspberry Pi and some solar power, they've still got access to the whole thing. And then they can still, it's built to be easily shareable. Even without Git, you can still share the files, or you could even print it out on paper and still read it, and it would still make sense. So it's kind of future-proof in a way, and I like that too.
So I'm sort of piling up the questions here myself, but first I have to let everybody know that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Collide. That's Collide with a K. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures unsecured devices can't access your apps. Collide has some big news. If you're an Okta user, Collide can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance. Collide patches one of the major holes in zero trust architecture. That's device compliance. Think about it. Your identity provider only lets known devices log into apps, but just as a device is known doesn't mean it's in a secure state. In fact, plenty of devices in your fleet probably shouldn't be trusted. Maybe they're running on an out-of-date OS, or maybe they've got unencrypted credentials lying around. If your device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, it can't access the organization's SaaS apps or other resources. The device user can't log into your company's cloud apps until they've fixed the problem on their end. It's that simple. For example, a device will be blocked if an employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser. Using end-user remediation helps drive your fleet to 100% compliance without overwhelming your IT team. Without Collide, IT teams have no way to solve these compliance issues or stop insecure devices from logging in. With Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet, Mac, Windows, and Linux. Collide is unique in that it makes device compliance part of the authentication process. When a user logs in with Okta, Collide alerts them to compliance issues and prevents unsecured devices from logging in. It's security you can feel good about because Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of their product. To sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration, and most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit collide.com/floss to learn more or book a demo. That's KOLIDE.com/floss. Okay, so Pete, when you were talking about Ward Cunningham, and Ward, by the way, for people who don't know, I think most of our listeners probably do, but some might not, created the whole wiki concept, the original wiki way back when. And and Pete was involved in one of the first companies making use of that. And but where is FedWiki? I frantically went around looking to find it. I found stuff on GitHub, but where, if people want to find FedWiki, where should they look for it?
That's a good question. Fed.wiki.org works,
Okay.
and then Ward and a crew of FedWiki folks are also on Matrix, and they've got a good active chat going there.
Okay, that's cool. There's several different ways I could take this, but will there ever, this is kind of a very selfish question on my part, because I'm a sort of medium active Wikipedia editor, meaning one of the first cartoons I ever saw, that was a cartoon, it was a story in The Onion when they were still print, and it said like back in 1995, error found on internet, so, and I'm one of those people, I'm a born editor, so I want to edit things, there's a misplaced modifier, there's a dangling participle, that tense isn't right, wait a minute, there's something new there, and I'll edit Wikipedia pages. It's a bear. It's really hard, and my own page, I have one there. Of course, I can't self-edit on it, but other people want to edit on it or try to improve it, but they can't because there are all of these really UI issues. Is there hope for that? I know they have a kind of a low skill version of editing there, but if you want to do the real thing, you have to get into their actual editing system. So is there hope?
For Wikipedia in particular, or for wikis in general?
No, for Wikipedia in particular. Anything else besides MediaWiki, I guess, which is the editing system.
I haven't played around with the easy editor on MediaWiki for a while. I actually don't know. They've got a lot of legacy source, wiki markup, MediaWiki markup stuff, it's a challenge to keep the number of pages that they've got kind of up and running with new editing stuff. So there's kind of a trade-off, making it easier versus making it compatible, and I think the people who contribute to Wikipedia, maybe it's kind of a bad thing, but maybe it's kind of also not a bad thing if there's a bit of a learning curve to get really good at it. So
yeah, I noticed one of the common hacks on it is if one team beats another team and one player stands out, somebody will jump in on the defeated team's page and say, so-and-so is the owner of the Boston Celtics, or so-and-so owns Man United, right? So anyway, which are relatively easy things to do. I want to go back into something, one of the kind of one-liners, not even a one-liner, but you dropped that that wikis are, not wikis, oh boy, I'm jumping the tracks there, but AI can be creative and is creative. And I've noticed this in playing with ChatGPT, which I can't get into in the last 2 or 3 days because it's busy. But even with Perplexity.ai, which I've come to love, and that's the actual URL, Perplexity.ai. I don't know if it uses GPT-3 or 4 or whatever it is it's doing, but it gives you sources and answers your question. And for a lot of search, like my wife spent a lot of time on Amazon looking for cushions. She was looking for cushions for an antique bench we have that we acquired for nothing at a garage sale, and couldn't find anything through Google or Bing. Bing has this kind of last I looked at it, kind of a fakey front end with, hey, it's kind of like ChatGPT, ask it a question, gives you an answer. Then it just gives you a big garbaged up page that sits of a whole lot of graphics and stuff that sit on top of the same old search results. But if, in fact, I can't find, let's just go into search for a second. I don't mean to filibuster, but search is deprecated, badly deprecated right now. As somebody who's been writing on the web for over 25 years, I know this because I have old stuff that I put Easter eggs in, so I would know that Google found them. They're gone. They don't find old stuff, and there are links that go to those things. The entirety of Linux Journal is still online. It goes back to 1994. It's all in HTML. It all has, un404 URLs. Most of that, a lot of that stuff, Google and Bing are not going to find because they've got rid of PageRank and they're looking at something else now. I guess it's currency or some buzz or some other thing. But if we ask Perplexity.ai, it'll find them. Maybe it'll find a tweet pointing to it or something. And my wife found 2 wonderful links that got her to the cushions, to making somebody will custom make the cushions that she wants. Did it in 2 minutes with Perplexity.ai. But you don't get the same answer every time. I mean, it's creative that way. If you ask it the same question twice, once on another browser, it's different. So where I want to go with this and kind of probe your head about is how do we offload on AI and things like it? And I think we need many different nouns than we've had so far over there. What we're not good at, like long-term memory. Computing's been fantastic for long-term memory for a long time, but how do we offload that and repetitive tasks and holding down non-recurring costs, while at the same time maximizing what makes us most human and creative? Just want to sort of probe your brain about that. And if you've thought about it, I think you probably have thought about that.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. There's a bunch of hard trade-offs there. First of all, one of the things to think about, I thought a lot about it with ChatGPT, is that we're still kind of at the tech demo stage of, conversational AI in particular, in ChatGPT's case. I think a lot of people. Doc, you and I have a friend in common, David, and he and I were going back and forth about whether ChatGPT was, dangerous because it wasn't telling the truth a lot of the times, or if it was, not. David's point of view was that, geez, if this thing looks and smells and feels like a fact machine, then people are going to think it's a fact machine. And my position was more like, well, you can tell it's a tech demo. The CEO continually says it's not a very good product. It's kind of it's an early demo. It's a preview thing. It's gotten hard to tell nowadays when something is done and when something is still in flux. Conversational AI is still in flux. It does a lot of stupid things. And yet, it's also really helpful for some things. And the fit and finish nowadays of products, I'm on this experimental messaging, you can't even call it a platform, messaging set of protocols called Nostr, Nostr, very experimental and a little bit dangerous in ways that you don't know that it's dangerous unless you're a pretty technical person. I've noticed some of the clients for Nostr are very clean looking, very beautiful. Amethyst is the one I use on Android, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. You can't tell from the look and feel of it that it's also super experimental. It's like flying in an airplane, made out of baling wire and canvas. So ChatGPT, I feel, is a little bit in the same place where it looks so good and does so much that it's hard to think that it's not done. But I think, it's going to take a couple of years for us to kind of really come around to how to use AI, what it's good for, what it's not good for, how it helps us make sense, how it's not dangerous. The thing you talk about with how much stuff Google doesn't tell you, that maybe Perplexity is able to tell you. It's a really hard judgment. It turns out to be a really hard problem when you have billions and billions and billions of pages of information to tell which are the ones, which are a few dozen that if I were if I were a magical superpower, which few dozen should I tell this person who's asking me a question are the important ones. I think I'm going to give a quick plug for Massive Wiki. Part of the answer is that something like Massive Wiki that makes putting web pages up and making links is going to be more important in this coming future, so that you can go, hey, I trust Dan. If Dan's got a website that he links to about TWiT or about FLOSS or about music, Dan is a person I'm going to trust. This kind of peer-to-peer trust and humans in the mix is something that we see. I'm also on Mastodon. Peter Kaminski at Tools for Thought rocks. I'm on Mastodon, and you can see there that people talking to people, instead of having an algorithm like Twitter or an algorithm like Facebook, that peer-to-peer thing feels really good, and it feels really useful, and it feels like humanity again, kind of, rather than being part of this, a tiny cog in a big machine like Twitter or Facebook. I think we're going to see more and more of that. We're going to see more decentralization. We're going to see more people trusting people rather than people trusting, a billion people intermediated by a social network machine that doesn't really care about any of those people. And it's a trade-off. It's a big trade-off. I know there are still things. I am mostly off Twitter now. It's gotten hard for me to use. Just practically, when they killed the third-party clients, I used a third-party client to read Twitter, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm not reading Twitter very much anymore. There's things I miss. When there's a big news event, Twitter is still the place for at least a little while to find out what's going on with the big news. If I want interaction or talking to people about stuff I care about, it turns out Mastodon, even though I have much less reach there, much less global reach, I have a lot more semi-local distributed reach that's really important to me. And it's cool. I feel like in 20, 25 years ago when we were talking about the web, it was really hard to imagine locality that wasn't geographic. But now it's really common for me on Mastodon or Zoom to be talking with people around the world, and we have locality of topic and sentiment and people we like. That locality feels natural now, and now with the pandemic, that's the kind of locality where I hang out rather than in my geographic space. I get out a lot. Thankfully, I live in beautiful San Diego. We have great weather, great places to hike and walk. So my wife and I are outside a lot, but we're not with people in San Diego. We're with people across the world, local, through Zoom or through Massive Wiki or through chat.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept, Peter. The idea of being with people from a distance, obviously because of the pandemic, and even before that, we've been doing FLOSS for 15, 16 years, whatever it is. That idea of being with people remotely as was around, but do you think that's going to develop? Because one of the things that I found really interesting recently, and it's not something I've got to be honest that I've looked into a lot, was people are talking a lot about the metaverse and metaverses, which doesn't just have to be related to Facebook, although they are obviously big in pushing. They've called themselves Meta. They changed the name to Meta, so there you go. But apparently there are other metaverses out there. Do you think that kind of idea of having higher quality connection, if you like, with less people from a larger distance, if that makes sense, do you think that will move into things like VR and AR and stuff like that, and the idea of we could, I don't know, play table tennis or something together, me and you, even though we're on different sides of the planet, virtually or something like that? Do you think that will affect how people interact and share information?
It's a good question, and I have to say that I'm not really an expert on AR and VR. I know that it reminds me of video telephony, we used to call it back in the day. AT&T was working on video phones, in the early 60s, maybe even earlier. And for the longest time, for literally decades, it was a joke. I apologize to the folks that were working on it. I'm sure it didn't feel like a joke at the time, but it's like, if I think back to the, when I was around in the 80s or something like that, it was like, why would I ever talk to somebody on a television screen? That's silly, Handset is just fine. It wasn't until I don't know what the magic sauce was that got us all on Zoom, and a lot of it was actually the push from the pandemic. But now it feels supernatural to be doing video conferencing, and it feels weird now to go into an office situation and work with people. Not that I don't love that. I am cautious and masks and stuff like that. But nowadays it's like I get up in the morning, I log on, and I have literally hours every week where I'm talking with people all around the world through Zoom or through other video conferencing. AR and VR kind of remind me of the same thing. It's definitely a solution to something, but we don't know what the question is, what the problem is that it solves. And I feel the same way. It's in the same way that I used to, think that talking video telephony is a dumb idea. AR and VR seem cool, but come on, what do I really use it for? So I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the person-to-person connection, I think, is going to be, this is, we've been talking about decentralization for a long time, I think, D-Web, things like that. It's starting to feel real, and it solves problems that now we can kind of talk about what problems it solves. The centrality of Twitter, the centrality of Facebook is a big deal. It's good in a lot of ways, and it's really bad in a lot of other ways. It's hard to give up some of that centrality sometimes when I'm, working with distributed tools, and it's, sometimes the distributed tools are this decentralized, distributed. They're clunky sometimes, but I can tell it's the way of the future, that will have more purview with a smaller number of people rather than, purview of billions of people and being a very small part of it. I think also this, and I don't mean to sound like a prepper or a survivalist or a doomer, but it's hard not to notice that we've got a bunch of existential crises. Food production, food distribution, soil health, clean water, climate change. It feels like we're going to end up in a lot of places where being able to work with the people around you, whether that's geographically around you or in the same watershed, or around the same topic, is going to be an important skill and a survival skill for in the decades to come. So I think it's the way of the future.
Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot on but given the nature of this show, it makes sense. But we talk a lot on this show about decentralized everything, really. But you mentioned there are good things about centralized or some advantages to centralized systems as well. What would those be, do you think?
There's a couple. One of them is reach. Being able to news for me, I started getting most of my news from Twitter probably 8 years ago or something like that. And even though that stopped in the last 6 months, having and another example is Facebook. The reason to be on Facebook is because everybody else is on Facebook, not just my colleagues who work on tech, but also my cousins and my second cousins and my third cousins and the people I knew from high school, and the people who have got some local thing going on that I need to be part of, the farmers market or whatever. So that centrality, the number of people is a real boon. Another good and bad thing about centralization is, and we feel this keenly with Massive Wiki, is user interface and training and things like that. If I need to tell somebody how to use Facebook, there aren't that many ways to use Facebook. Yeah. If I want to tell somebody how to use Massive Wiki, it's like, well, do you want to use Obsidian, or would you rather use Pulsar Editor? There's a couple different ways to do Git. We have to talk about which Git forge is the best Git forge for you. Maybe it's GitHub, maybe it's Codeberg, maybe it's SourceHut. And all of those decentralizations mean that not everybody is having the same experience. So on Mastodon, I can only post 500 character posts, and if I want to post 1,500 characters, it's 3 posts that I hope will get kind of packaged together and linked together. Maybe not. There's other clients where 5,000 characters is the limit. People have different experiences with different clients. They have different training needs. They have, it's a confusing mess. It's something that we've solved for in the real world. Like spatiality is distributed. If I want to go to a city, a big city, I could go to Tokyo or London or Paris or some places big, some places small. We have kind of common interfaces that we've come to. I can probably figure out how the mass transit works in some place. I can probably ask for help and get it. People have known how to, oh, you're from the big city, let me tell you how it works here. Or, oh, you're from a little town, let me tell you how it works here. That's all common experience and stuff that you can tell it's kind of missing in the decentralized world. But we'll get there,
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned on the last show, I keep jumping back to the last show that you were on, apologies for that, but it's because I recently watched it today. You were talking about non-technical users, or it fits into what you were just saying, actually, about the interface that people use. Obviously, you've got Git underneath, which is powering Massive Wiki and moving the files around, versioning, all that kind of stuff. But I was really interested to hear that you have some non-technical users who they can learn to use like short keyboard shortcuts, things like that are really simple, so they don't have to know how it works underneath. They just know that this is what I press when I want to push something out and update it, and this is what I press when I want to pull in what's new. Is that a big goal for you with Massive Wiki, to make it available to people no matter what their kind of technical level is?
Definitely, yes. It pains me a little bit that Git is so useful and so practical. It turns out that there's great news on that front. The people maintaining the Obsidian Git plugin, which is one of the key things that we use. It's not the only thing we use. Mm-hmm. It plugs into Obsidian and then lets Obsidian, which is another key thing that we use, but not the only thing that we use. The people doing the Obsidian Git plugin have been doing a great job of simplifying it and making it easier to use. It's got better error handling. It's got now a great little side dashboard thing that lets you just push a couple buttons to make it go. There's actually even a button that just does the right thing. If you just click the one button, it almost always does the right thing. So the Git stuff has gotten a lot easier even in the past 5 or 6 months. We still have trouble getting Git installed. It's not, it was never built to be installed by non-technical folks, so there's not great ways to do that. We're making that better. Mm-hmm. There's a Git written completely in JavaScript that's getting used on mobile devices now, and it's baked into the app. It's not a separate thing. I think we'll see some of that on the web too. It's getting easier and easier. And yet, I can also tell, so soon, maybe in 6 months or a year, maybe Git won't even be a scary thing about Massive Wiki. It's still a little bit scary to get into it. And by the way, there's in the massive.wiki website, you can find an email address to click and send us an email, and we'll help you out. At least until we get overwhelmed with too many people. There's a interesting thing with Git. We've got a non-technical but sophisticated writing partner now who's been doing some pretty fancy stuff with Git branches and stuff with us. And it turns out that there's a little bit of complexity about Git that's actually really useful when you're collaborating. The way that you do two-phase commits, which might sound like I'm talking about a software thing, but it's the same thing that like the double door system in an airport works by, you can get into this part of the hallway, but you can't get out until they close that door and check you, and then you can get out that way. Having file editing work that way and getting people working together on file editing, it helps a lot to do some of the workflow back and forth things, the commit phases that Git does. And they're not, I don't think they're particularly hard to understand conceptually. We still just need better interfaces to them. But it helps a little bit to know, I know why I'm doing the steps that I'm doing, and I know why she did those steps over on her computer. And then when we push a button and things merge in the cloud, it'll work better than if we hadn't. So I'm hopeful that will get also easier and will help document it more and make sense more. I'm really looking forward to professional writers at least using Git as a tool in the back end. It does amazing stuff for software developers, and it should be something that anybody who's using text a lot uses too.
Boy, there's so many places to go here. And I was just thinking that, Linus Torvalds struck with lightning twice, once with Linux and also with Git. Pretty amazing, actually. But first, before we get to the next topic, there's so many, I want to let people know that joining Club TWiT is another great way to support our network here. As a member, you'll get access to ad-free versions of all the shows on TWiT, as well as other great benefits. There's a bonus TWiT Plus feed, which includes footage and discussions that didn't make the final show edit, as well as bonus shows we've started, such as Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, Ask Me Anythings, Fireside Chats with some of your favorite Ask Me Anythings and Fireside Chats with some of your, Ask Me Anythings and Fireside Chats with some of your favorite TWiT guests and co-hosts. As FLOSS Weekly listeners, you may be interested in checking out another Club TWiT exclusive show, the Untitled Linux Show, hosted by our own Jonathan Bennett. So sign up to Club TWiT for just $7 a month. Head over to twit.tv/clubtwit and join today. We thank you for your support. So Pete, one of the one-liners you dropped was spatiality is distributed in the natural world. This is, we would never have said that if the internet wasn't here, right? It's they kind of, the inverse square law applies all over the place, so, yep. And including speech, including memory, even the space that is in our heads, we forget most things after 7 seconds, but somehow retain meaning, which is also really an interesting and strange thing. I don't think we fully comprehended ourselves before we try to embody it in machines. And I guess we have. We said, okay, you machine, remember everything for us, because we're not. And then we rely on each other. That's one of the interesting things to me about this, that and how long these things sometimes take. The old cartoon, I don't even know if the funny papers still even exist in newspapers. Who's looking at those? But Dick Tracy was this one that ran in the 50s and 60s, and maybe still runs today. And Dick Tracy was way ahead of his time. He had on his wrist, and it always had a little pop over that had a little zigzag lightning thing that said two-way wrist radio. It looked just like an Apple Watch, right? The Apple Watch comes along a lot later. I've got one of those on right now. It's telling me my heartbeat. It answers it projects the phone. Telephony has become any to any. So I'm going to not totally jump the track here, but Paul Barron, when he inadvertently designed the internet, when he came up with his original drawing for the Rand Corporation in the early 60s, when all computing was centralized, you had a big mainframe, and you had a bunch of terminals, and that was a computer. And so he had a drawing of a scattering of dots, and all those dots were connected to one central dot. And then the next frame, like a cartoon, was decentralized, which was a bunch of the dots connected in spiderish way, like a bunch of them, and they were all connected with each other, but it's still a central one. And the third one was distributed, what he called distributed. And he introduced to the world this wonderful distinction between decentralized and distributed, which even today we're not fully grokking, I don't think. But distributed, everything was connected to each other or to the adjacent dot. But I think there's something beyond that, which is kind of what I'd call independent, which is what the internet is. We're all on the same globe. We're all on the same, what Craig Burton called the giant zero, which is the shape that best represents the internet is a hollow sphere in which any point is connected to any, can be connected to any other point through an arc that goes through the middle, an arc in the sense of a straight line in geometry. And or what is that? There's another word for that. I forget what it was. It's been, I took that in the 10th grade, so it's been a long time. What's the straight line that goes across a circle? Oh,
the diameter?
I'm thinking vector, but
not a vector. A vector has direction to it. It is the connection between any 2 points that's straight. Okay. But it's this three-dimensional, you have this giant zero, a hollow sphere. And the absence of distance is one of the things that characterizes this space. And we have to remember that, spatiality is, it's here in the physical where we know what that is. We're eliminating it in this other place. And it's early. I mean, I keep saying this over and over again, but you seem to have a really strong sense of where we've been, what's possible, what's going on now, what's not quite done yet, and all that. And I'm going to go to another place that's maybe related, maybe not, but it's an interesting story that nobody quite understands exactly how the Polynesians managed to settle and communicate and trade among many islands that are widely separated. Hawaii, way the hell out there, from most of the southern islands. And it's kind of accepted, I think, at this point that they felt the ocean. I mean, through their feet. And it wasn't just that they saw their birds now, so we must be near land, or we see smoke from there, but rather we're actually feeling the swells. The swells are moving in this way and that way. And I sort of wonder if we're doing that now. And if as we're looking at AI and saying, well, it's another ocean, but maybe it's got many different kinds of what in a misnomerly way we call intelligence. It's really not. It's memory plus a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, I'm just throwing all that crap at you because I think you'll be able to run with it. I know you well enough to know you have something better to say about this than I will.
I like the analogy of Polynesian seafaring, and the funny thing is actually there's a decentralized protocols secure scuttlebutt and I think I heard that Nostr and secure scuttlebutt have some relationship, and they're protocols that were developed by people who live on a boat and are disconnected most of the time, and so a chunk of the protocol, it deals with being disconnected and then connecting and sharing messages and then disconnecting again. I guess the way that you described it makes you think, if you're sitting on a Polynesian boat, you kind of have a sense of what's out there, but you're also a little bit by yourself, maybe with another few boats next to you. Decentralized, I hesitate to use the word social media, but decentralized chat systems and even Massive Wiki feel a little bit like that. There's locality and then there's distance, and it feels different than the big city that is Twitter or Facebook.
It just occurs to me there's a bit of a link here because Doc was saying about Polynesians and all of that. This is just a totally off-topic question for you, Pete. Not off-topic. Doesn't the name Wiki come from Hawaii anyway? I seem to remember hearing somewhere it was on buses. It said Wiki.
Yeah. Wiki means quick, and Ward was inspired to. He remembered the Wiki bus and named it the Wiki Web.
Excellent.
Totally
There
right.
you go, Doc. So it all
Wow.
links
Yeah,
back
very
to
good.
Polynesia.
Yeah, and I think I spent some time in Hawaii, and I'm always into history, and I believe it was discovered first by people from the Marquesas, but they traded. And you're going 1,000 miles. That takes some. I mean, somebody recently discovered or alleged, and this is not a scientist, but was looking at the caves in Lascaux in France. Lascaux, I guess that's one of
Sounds
them.
right.
And noticed there were markings, and he realized they were using math there. They were keeping track of the seasons, and the markings that were sort of extraneous were actually purposeful, and they had to do with the seasons. But then I think, geez, humans came along and all the large animals disappeared, or most of them did, and this is more than coincidental everywhere the humans go, including the last of the islands discovered by the Polynesians, which were New Zealand. They came there and the giant auk or whatever it was disappeared, and we haven't been good. But we made this place, we made the internet, and it's this habitat. So let me ask you a question. This is maybe a little bit off the wall. Do you think we ever replace TCP/IP with something that will be just as generative as TCP/IP? Because TCP/IP, you're not going to get rid of it, I don't think. We can get rid of X25. We can get rid of a whole lot of other crap that we inherited from phone companies.
It's not going away for a long time. Our same friend, mutual friend David, I always remember something he said. The IP was made to be neutral, basically, and have no value judgment. It doesn't have any information about the packets that it's sending with the end-to-end principle. And our friend David said, not having a value system built into your technology is a valued decision that you've made.
Oh, yeah.
That means that you're going to
Definitely.
get lots of terrible things running over that system.
Yeah. This is, by the way, this is David Reed we're talking about, right?
I was thinking of David Weinberg, although David Reed is.
Oh, David Weinberg. Yeah. You see, there's so many Davids. I'm a David too. That's why I'm called Doc. It's just like too many of us. Yeah.
TCP/IP is going to be around for a long time. Yeah. That's a good bet.
Yeah. So there are, and I see I don't know how close we are to the end here. I think we started at 32 after, but boy, there's so many ways we can go. We've covered what. Let me go into this one, which is clouds for a second. I'm not that geeky, but I'm geeky enough to have run my own server, my own mail server, my own web server, to have operated as an out of my house, because in the mid to late 90s, you could get a dedicated line. It was only 33 kilobits or something, but you could get. I had 16 IP addresses in my house. I had a bunch of servers. We ran cron jobs that pushed what I wrote up to Linux Journal at night, stuff like that. And one by one, these things I handed over to clouds. And then in most cases, this is good in some ways. I mean, email became 99% or more spam, and we really needed a giant to deal with that for us. But I want that independence back. I feel like by handing some of our agency over to other parties, as Richard Stallman said, the cloud is somebody else's computer, and it is. And I lost most of my email because all were on an IMAP server at Rackspace, and it got killed. And I may get it back yet. I haven't called them yet, but I will. Maybe their phones are not ringing off the hook now. But there are vulnerabilities here, and one of them is, I think, that we're exposed to. No, not exposed. We become inured to the benefits. We forget the benefits of independence, and then small group collaboration, like you're so good at. What are your thoughts about that, as we're coming down to the?
First of all, it's pretty funny that you say that you're not that technical. It's a lot of pretty hardcore technical stuff that you've mounted there.
But I wasn't that good at it.
Well, you know,
I was dangerous. I'm on the phone with people while I'm doing it. So anyway,
the good news is the D-Web, the distributed web, is perking along. It's not that uncommon now, or it's getting to the point where it's usable not just as a science experiment, I guess. IPFS or Holochain or Noster is actually really interesting. It takes it takes a fair amount of turns out crypto to make that work, to make sure that you put stuff out onto distributed servers and can get it back and know that it's still the same, and maybe other people, if you didn't want other people seeing it, they couldn't see it, and things like that. Being able to identify yourself, as yourself and things like that. There's a lot of crypto involved, and I don't mean that. I don't mean cryptocurrency, and I don't mean bad kind of illegal crypto, but there's a lot of stuff where you have to secure things to make it so that you can let your stuff float over an ocean of essentially commodity servers and commodity networking. But it's coming. It's coming along pretty nicely. It's fun to get back into. Even Mastodon, which is, I guess Mastodon and ActivityPub have been kind of hard to use for a while. It's getting easier. It's getting more popular. More people are using it and saying, "Hey, this part is hard to use, and I wish it were different." And so that's changing. We're solving a lot of problems. There's still a lot of work ahead, but it's coming along.
There's always work ahead. So we're pretty much at the end here. So I have to ask you, as we did before, but maybe it's changed now, what your favorite text editor and scripting language are.
My favorite text editor is still Emacs, and by scripting language, you mean maybe programming language that's a scripting language, or I think this is the same answer. I'm using Python a lot nowadays.
Yeah, that's the basic one. Yeah.
But I still really love JavaScript. The JavaScript, the adult JavaScript, grown-up JavaScript is super nice. It was not very nice when it was a kid, but it's a real pleasing thing. I just don't use it as much.
Yeah, we at the point we can't live without it. Well, this has been great, and I think we're gonna have to have you back every 6 months, something like that.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and I'm also glad we through a schedule mix-up and all that, you actually stepped in here. So that this is not our original. You were not our original scheduled guest, but you are certainly a highly appreciated one right now. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Doc, and thanks, Dan.
So Dan, that was good. We went deep. That was
really
stuff.
Interesting. We could have talked on for a long time about lots of different things, I'm sure. Great and really interesting stuff. Nice to talk to Peter and get his thoughts on lots of things. He's got lots of fascinating insights into things.
I kind of felt like we needed to take this to a pub and start pounding some brews, because
I'm good with that.
that would have made a lot more sense. Just because anyway, we could go into a lot of stuff here. Did you think about this other thing? It's there really is we're at a moment right now where I feel like the whole AI thing, which needs many, many more words for what all these things are, really needs has just awakened in me a whole lot of delight. I'm delighted by some of this stuff, and I sort of feel like we have so many of the wrong conversations. Microsoft versus Google. Who gives a damn, really? What's the stuff that matters? This is, there's some really great threads online right now on how it's saving time for teachers, saving time for programmers. This one guy wrote a long thread on Twitter that was about like I was a 10x programmer now. I'm a 100x programmer, right? And here's how. And he shares all this stuff. His name is Salvatore something. I want to have him on the show. He's doing open source stuff. So
through using AI to help him program. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
wow,
brilliant stuff. Dave Weiner pointed at him, and that's how I found him, saying, "Read this." So quick then, Dan, before we go off, any plugs for you?
Yeah, people can hear me on the radio around the world, in fact, due to the wonders of the internet. Although it is at one fixed time, unfortunately. You could record it. Yeah, if you go to my website, danlynch.org, I do need to update it. Maybe I can get an AI to do that for me or something. That would be good. Yeah, so I will update it. But yeah, if you go to danlynch.org, which is my website, you can find all my links on there. And I need to update it, actually, because Ant's showing the preview. We've got... it's still got a Twitter widget. That's how old it is. It's got a Twitter widget in the sidebar, and I do use Mastodon most. I do still have Twitter, but I use Mastodon mostly now. So I need to update that to a Mastodon widget or something. But yeah, that's the place to find me.
Okay, great. So I would let people know that next week we have Arun Gupta. He's the head of open ecosystems at Intel, and he's on the OpenSSF board. So that'll be our guest next week, and Simon Phipps, our other UK guy, co-host, will be on that show. So we will see you then. Take it easy.
Hey, we should talk Linux. It's the operating system that runs the internet, a bunch of game consoles, cell phones, and maybe even the machine on your desk. And you already knew all that. What you may not know is that TWiT now has a show dedicated to it, the Untitled Linux Show. Whether you're a Linux pro, a burgeoning sysadmin, or just curious what the big deal is, you should join us on the Club TWiT Discord every Saturday afternoon for news, analysis, and tips to sharpen your Linux skills. And then make sure you subscribe to the Club TWiT exclusive Untitled Linux Show. Wait, you're not a Club TWiT member yet? Well, go to twit.tv/clubtwit and sign up. Hope to see you there.